Welcome to another treatment of the International Sunday School lesson. Today's lesson is entitled The Faith of the Wise Men, and it's taken from the book of Matthew, 2nd chapter, verses 1 through 12, and it's for December the 31st, 2023, winter quarter, lesson number 5. Now, I want to wish everyone a very happy new year. Be safe out there and worship the Lord in this up and coming new year. Now, a little background information. Today's lesson, of course, is about the wise men who came to visit with Jesus and to see the coming Messiah, how the Messiah came, the ruler that was born in Judea. And there are a couple of things that we need to understand about this. First off, is that the ruler of the time, Herod the Great, was an extremely cruel individual and conniving and sly, and that he did not want to relinquish power to anybody, including his own children. And he was a very evil person, as this is played out throughout this story. The other thing is, too, is that unlike the stories and the cartoons and the plays that we've seen about the wise men coming, the Bible does not say they were only 3 wise men. There's a very high probability that they were more than 3 wise men who came to worship Jesus. And the reason why we would think there would be more than 3 wise men is by the fact that they drew so much attention when they came. So there was probably a good size entourage who came to worship the Lord and to make a visitation with Jesus. And the only way that has gotten started that there were only 3 wise men is the fact that there are 3 gifts listed in the account. Also, too, it's important for us to realize that Jesus was not a babe in a manger when this happened. There is a very high probability that Jesus was probably closer to about 2 years old when the wise men came for their visitation. Okay? Now, Matthew 2, 1 and 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. Now, I want to point out a couple of things about this star. First off, it was not a star in the east because the wise men were from the east. So the star would have been risen in the west. Because if the star had rose in the east, they'd been heading toward India. Okay? But they were heading from the east to Bethlehem, to Judea. The other thing too is the Bible is not specific at all about exactly what kind of star this was. Now, when we as 21st century people refer to a star, we are talking about a sun that is light years away, some kind of solar object that is light years away. And that's what we call stars now in our 21st century. But in the time that the New Testament was written, an aster, which is what that word is in the original Greek, an aster was only just a light in the sky. They made no differentiation between what type of light in the sky it was. That's the reason why in the book of Revelations where it says that the stars fell from the sky. It's not the book of Revelation is not saying that these suns are falling to the earth, because it would be impossible for a sun to fall to the earth. The earth would fall to the sun just because of the relative size of the objects. So this star that rose in the west, we have no indication exactly what that was. It could have been a supernova. It could have been an angel in the sky. It could have been an asteroid. We just don't know because the Bible does not specify. Okay. Now, Matthew 2 and 3, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, Herod the Great was troubled because he knew of all these prophecies that even in the secular pagan world, two Roman historians even talked about how that there was a belief that there would be a king, a worldwide king, who was going to be born in Judea. And so it was very common knowledge that a king would be born, a ruler of the world would be born in this area. So Herod, being the very selfish, self-centered person that he was very upset at what he was being told. And because the people of Jerusalem knew how cruel and how self absorbed Herod the Great was, they were terrified, I'm sure, of what Herod would do to protect his authority. Okay? So they were troubled too. Not that they were afraid they would lose Herod as a king, they were afraid what Herod the king would do to try to maintain his authority. And as the story progresses, we see how much heartache Herod the Great triggered trying to keep that authority. Now, Matthew 2, 4 through 6. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So we see here how that the chief priests and the scribes, by the fact that they were literate, that they understood the prophecies of the Messiah, they are in placing an indictment on themselves by showing they have that knowledge, because 30 years later they are going to plot to kill Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, and they are going to plot to have him crucified on the cross. But they did not do that out of ignorance. They did that out of love of power, of love of authority, of love of prestige. And that's why they did that. Okay? Now, Matthew 2, 7 through 8. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him. So we see the slyness, the sliminess of Herod the Great, of how he's trying to work a deal out so he can figure out exactly when Jesus was born, so he would know what year of child to start killing. Okay. Matthew 2, 9 through 11. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him the gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. So we see here that when they got there, Jesus was not in a manger. They had already went and got him a house because it was 2 years or around 2 years into his birth that they got there. And they had presented their gifts and they were demonstrating how they were rejoicing at this. And so they were there. And I'm sure that there were people around Jesus who actually this made a huge impact on. And these would have been some of the same people who later would accept him as the Messiah and be the first converts. Okay. Now, Matthew 2 and 12. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So we see here how God had warned them in a dream not to tell Herod. And this made the way for Joseph to get the dream to run and flee to Egypt. And we also know how that all the events that happened after this. Okay? The events that happened after this was Herod the Great in his selfishness, his self-absorption, his lust for power, how that he went out and realized that the wise men had been warned and fled. And so he went out and killed the innocents around that area, trying to get to Jesus. And there's a lot of similarities that are here where we see about where the metaphors in the story of the redemption of the Jews from Egypt, how that they fled to Egypt to escape the famine that was in the universal famine that was in the land, and how that they were being called out of Egypt after it was over with. And if you'll think of the later on in the story, how that Joseph got another dream when Herod the Great had died, that it was safe to return. And so Joseph took Mary and Jesus and returned to the promised land. Okay. Well, friends, good Lord willing, I'll be back with you next weekend.